What are the top 3 things that you need to watch for with Buccaneers training camp officially underway? That and more on today's episode of Locked On Bucs.
You are Locked On Buccaneers, your daily Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, and welcome into this episode of Locked On Bucs, your daily podcast covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank you for making Locked On Bucs your first listener view every day. Don't forget you can subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, you can follow along on Twitter. I am James Yarcho at JYarcho_Bucs. He is Evan Klosky at EKlosky WTSP. We are your credentialed members of the media covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I'm the deputy editor over at BucsNation.com. Evan is, of course, on 10 Tampa Bay and at 10TampaBay.com. And you can catch the show Monday through Friday along with the everydayers. And for that, share my appreciation for your continued support of the show. One of the ways you can support the show is become a Locked On Bucs insider. News, rumors, updates, general thoughts, one-on-one conversations with me via text message, no ads or anything like that. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs or click the link in the show notes to become an insider today. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. As the playoffs wind down, the sports stop sportsing like we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Training camp is officially underway. The rookies reported on Monday. Most of the veterans reported on Tuesday. And so, it is that time. The offseason is no more. We have actual football things to discuss. And Evan, I'm curious as to what the 3 biggest things that you're watching for during training camp. We've talked a lot this offseason about the Bucs being underrated, overlooked, underappreciated. What's Baker going to do? There's been coaching changes. There's been big contracts thrown around. There's still a big contract in limbo. But obviously there are certain things that everyone's watching for in training camp, but I'm wondering, we'll start with the biggest one. What is your biggest storyline for Buccaneers training camp?
I'm watching the outside linebacker position, man. I feel like I've beaten this to a constantly in the offseason, but even with Randy Gregory now no showing and his future with the team completely up in the air. He's been moved to the reserve, essentially an inactive list, to where he doesn't count against the team's salary cap. He doesn't count against the team's roster count. He didn't show up to mandatory OTAs. He hasn't showed up to training camp. He's a new player, doesn't know much about Todd Bowles' scheme, and I have a really tough time believing they're going to go through this whole song and dance with him, despite whatever belief they have of what he's going to be able to do for them on the field. This isn't how Jason Light and company operate. I don't think the juice will be worth the squeeze, which means Anthony Nelson is now the leader in the clubhouse for sacks on the team when you talk about the outside linebacker position at 14.5. Joe Tryon-Shoyinka has 13. Yaya Diaby in his rookie season had 7.5. Then you got guys like Marquise Watts, who had 1 last year. He's a player that we're expecting, could develop a little bit from that redshirt year, we'll call it. Then Chris Braswell, who was obviously taken in the second round this year. He's still a rookie. I'm not willing to put high expectations on what he could provide. He certainly will be a depth piece, but I don't know how much of an impact player he'll be. And then we start going into guys like Jose Ramirez, So it's a problem position, one that Jason Light might have to now bring in another veteran to try to help out. It would be it's a little similar to what maybe happened to the Lightning, for any Tampa Bay Lightning fans out there, when they got Tyler Mott right before training camp. A player pretty much said, you know what, I ain't playing this season. And then they had to bring someone else in. And you know what, the guy they brought in did a pretty darn good job, got injured. But that's sort of what I'm looking at is just, that was the biggest weakness entering for this team entering the year. and on paper it just got a little bit worse. So maybe they can convince Shaq to come out of retirement, come back for another season now that they kind of shed the whole salary thing, and hopefully Miami doesn't get too angry. But yeah, that's ultimately that's the number one thing I'm looking at. I think it's the difference between this team, the gap between winning a division and being a Super Bowl contender. I think it lies right there.
Yeah, well, and I was just about to bring up the Miami Dolphins going through kind of a similar situation. Now, at least Shaq announced his retirement and didn't just no-show, but still, it was right before training camp starts, and then they ended up signing, was it Emmanuel Ogba on Tuesday.
But at least they're familiar with him, right?
Right, yeah, and pickings are slim out there on the edge market, as you would assume, because every team's always looking for edge rushers. So, we know that the Bucs brass, Todd Bowles, Jason Light, they're high on Marquise Watts. They're high on Jose Ramirez. I know Jason Light is really high on Jose Ramirez, who, similar to Watts, kind of redshirted last year. He had dealt with some injuries coming into training camp, dealt with injuries throughout the year, and was just kind of there to learn. But yeah, this is a tough situation, and not a great look for Randy Gregory to try to endear himself to his new teammates by no showing when everybody else is there.
Yeah. I just have a really tough time believing that Gregory's going to be part of this 2024 squad. This team has such good vibes. They have such good vibes, such great team chemistry. Why add this distraction into the mix? Like, what's the worth? Not to mention, it's not like Randy Gregory is some all-world player either. I mean, he would have been a nice addition to this outside linebacker position, considering what they kind of have in the room, experience. He certainly can still get after it, but it's not like he's Micah Parsons here. You're not like losing that much. He signed for $3 million, incentives up to $5 million. Like, it's just not worth it. It's so not worth it. Just look. Yeah. You deal whatever you got to do, and it could be a very serious matter for all we know. His chronic bouts with mental illness have been well stated, and I'm not here to say what he is or is not doing. Obviously he's suing the National Football League as well, due to north of $500,000 in fines due to THC levels that popped up in Denver. So, yeah, I don't know what the end game is here, but he had a pretty darn good run with the Niners. They kind of, you liked what you saw there. Seemed like he was doing well, and it's just not working out right now. So thanks. Wish you well. We'll take our money back. We'll find another option, and we'll trudge forward. And, I'll say it until I'm blue in the face. I think entering this year, I said it's going to be a problem. I like the pieces they have. It's just they don't have a star. They don't have a dude who's really going to wreak havoc back there. So, Joe Tryon-Shanka, man, this is if you want to get back into good graces of your friends there in the top of this organization, certainly your coaching staff, man, you have to step up. Yaya Diaby, as a second-year player, you have to be expected to go into the double digits category. Like that's what we're really talking about, because Anthony Nelson's steady Eddie, but his ceiling, he's a high floor guy. He's not a high ceiling guy. Right. I love Anthony Nelson, but he's not your number one. So I'm curious to see what Todd Bowles cooks up, and I imagine it's going to be a crap load of blitzes, just like he always does. And the back end might be a bit compromised, and you have to hope that this new look secondary with guys like Zion stepping up and, this slew of nickel options they have, that maybe there's a little bit of creativity going on in the all ball coach there.
All right. Well, there is plenty more to watch for. Hopefully, Evan is going to be bringing us something a little happier to watch for, but we'll find out. That's coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. You're hiring for your small business. You want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just a job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. So hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. There are 2.5 million small businesses that use LinkedIn for hiring, so don't miss out on your opportunity. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Thank you again for making Locked On Bucs your first listener view every day. Everydayers, make sure you are coming back tomorrow. I am still going to talk about how dumb Nick Wright is. Don't you worry about that. And then some reaction to the early releases of the NFL's top 100.
What did Nick Wright say?
Nick Wright chose the Bucs to go from first to worst because Nick Wright is dumb. Meanwhile, okay, if you want to hear the latest news from around all sports, but you want to hear more than the national narratives and you want the biggest stories without all the screaming, make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today is streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Yeah, don't ever trust anything Nick Wright says. When he says that LeBron is the greatest basketball player of all time, he should just get smacked across the face. But we're not here to talk about that. We're going to talk about that tomorrow. We're here to talk about Evan Klosky's top 3 storylines heading into Buccaneers training camp. And we've already discussed the Randy Gregory no-show, the outside linebacker depth going from thin to thinner. What is the next biggest storyline for you during Bucs training camp?
I want to keep tabs of the whole offensive operation. You know, we were kind of led to believe, and still to a degree, that it's going to be a seamless transition from Dave Canales to Liam Coen's system. But as we kind of talked with more and more players throughout voluntary and mandatory OTAs, they said that it is a big difference. Liam Coen has really bombarded these guys with a lot of stuff in the playbook. They're going to peel back probably in training camp, but Dave Canales essentially called everything, right? This is what we're running. Go out there. I'm going to lead you to the promised land, sort of deal. Now, Liam Coen's going out there and saying, hey, this is the play I'm calling, but if you see something different, Baker, you have the ability to check it. I'm going to give you another play and another play, right? Based on the coverage you're seeing, based on the alignment, like whatever it might be. So Liam Coen takes a lot of pride in the fact that this will be a player-run offense, right? Mm-hmm. That you guys are going to live and die with the results, and you guys are going to be the most responsible for success and failure. And the onus is going to be on how much you guys study and are able to recognize what's happening on the field, because I'm gonna essentially put the plates, the forks and knives out there. I'll give you a napkin, but when it comes to the food, you guys are going to deliver it, right? You guys are going to make the food and really be the ones that are driving this offense, because you'll make some of the calls at the line yourself and sort of dictate those things. So I love what he's going to bring to this offense. But again, is it going to be a seamless transition? Because it seems like to me that Dave Canales, again, from the outside looking in, Dave Canales had a little bit of kitty gloves on the offense, which is why I think the Panthers will do a little bit better with Bryce Young. He really simplifies things. And I think Liam Coen is more into I don't want to say complicating things, but he wants to present a lot of options out there. And he's going to hopefully fix the rushing attack because of it. He wants answers on answers on answers. But a lot of those answers are going to have to come from the players themselves on the field. So I want to see how overall operation looks. I certainly it's going to be really on Baker Mayfield, because when it comes down to Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, I can't wait to see what they kind of do when they have responsibilities in their hands of like, hey, it's a choice route. You make the call. We're coming to you. And to allow them to have sort of that decision-making for veterans like that is really going to be good for this offense. But, if Baker Mayfield's out there making decisions at the line, it's going to come down to like more responsibility on his plate, something I know that he's very excited about. But yeah, I want to see how this group looks, especially going up against Todd Bowles and his defense, because, he's going to be throwing the kitchen sink at you and trying and tinkering all these new finagled things.
Yeah, well, and not only that, and I talked about it on yesterday's show, Liam Coen, I'm really interested to see how he handles personnel, right? We've been talking for months about the battle at left guard. Apparently there's a battle at center. Graham Barton is not being handed this job, and Liam Coen talked about what Barton needs to do to win the starting job and what Robert Hainsey needs to do to retain the starting job. As I said, and I'm sure you're 100% with me, I still think Graham Barton ends up being the starter, and I don't think that this competition is – I think this is the Baker Trask competition of last year. It's a competition, but not really. But still –
it would be disrespectful to Hainsey to just say, hey, you're the backup now.
Right, yeah. I mean, and it's – I still like that approach from Liam Coen, right? He's going to make Barton earn it, and I had mentioned yesterday I would love to see a day where – if Barton struggles a little bit, he gets yanked and Hainsey's out there with the ones and kind of, try to light a fire under Barton. So yeah, not only am I interested to see kind of how he starts to run the offense, but how does he handle all of these position battles? Left guard, center, wide receiver 3 through 6, running back 2, how's the tight end structure going to work? So there's a lot to be excited about in terms of what Cohen's about to start doing here at training camp.
Robert Hainsey walking into the facility, just based on what we were able to see from the Buccaneers social media accounts and the pictures they took, it looks like he fattened up a little bit. That's obviously the biggest concern with Hainsey. It's not – the guy is smart as a whip, right? Mm-hmm. And he knows exactly what he needs to do out there. He doesn't make many MEs, but he just doesn't have the size. That's been the issue for him, is like, you're just not big enough, right? That's why we want to see like Cody Malk, right? I love the athleticism and talent, but you need to bulk up, bro. You need to get bigger, because there are mammoth humans in the trenches. So that's partly been the issue with the offensive line stuff, and why adding a guy like Graham Barton, who is just a behemoth of a human, is most notably why he's going to probably start week 1 at the center position, because when Jason Light says in a press conference that Todd and I had discussions going back to the middle of last year about adding bulk on the interior offensive line, it seems like this was a direct fix for that. And again, it's no demerit to Hainsey. If anything were to happen with Barton, or if he's not performing up to abilities, you have a guy who started pretty much every game for the past 2 seasons, outside of one playoff game because Jensen came back. So, they're in a really good spot with offensive line depth. Obviously, that guard position, whatever way you turn it, is a little bit of a concern. I'm just a firm believer that Malk is going to improve by a good margin entering year 2. And with that other position, I just hope that competition brings out the best in somebody, and you get a pretty good option there.
Yeah, that's certainly a big one that everyone's going to be keeping their eye on. All right, we got 2 down, 1 to go. Evan's final big storyline for training camp. That is next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs. I love sports. I love them so much. I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs have wound down, we get fewer games, and the sports aren't sportsing like I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open up the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. This summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Right now, the Dodgers are the favorites to win the World Series of plus 320, while the Tampa Bay Rays are struggling a little bit and sitting at plus 15,000. If you want to get in on some NFL or NHL odds early on, the Chiefs and Niners are tied atop the Super Bowl odds at plus 600, while the Bucs are at plus 5,500. Meanwhile, the Edmonton Oilers are the favorite to win next year's Stanley Cup at plus 850, followed by the defending champion Panthers at plus 950, and then the Tampa Bay Lightning are sitting down at plus 2,000. Head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Wrapping things up here on the Locked On Bucs podcast, joined by the man, the myth, the legend, Evan Klosky of 10 Tampa Bay and 10TampaBay.com. All right, we've talked about the edge rusher depth or lack thereof, and Randy Gregory pulling a Houdini. We have talked about Liam Coen putting the power of the offense in the hands of the players and position battles and everything that comes with the new offensive coordinator. What is your last big storyline that you're going to be keeping a close eye on during training camp?
I kind of melded together 1 and 2 to make 3, and I wanted this point to kind of be a little bit of an offensive and defensive focus. So one, the rushing attack, right? Like what's happening behind Rachaad White? We are firm believers that Rachaad White is the number one. We know he's going to be the number one. He hasn't necessarily been super effective as a rusher in a number one. If you look at his efficiency margins, not to say that won't get better considering we believe the offensive line will be a little bit better this year. So who is number two and what are they bringing to the table, right? Like that's a necessary thing we got to figure out considering that running backs have so much wear and tear. So I don't want to take Rachaad White's health history for granted and say that he's going to be 100% healthy, right? Those guys get beaten up. Things happen. So what are we looking at? Bucky Irving, Chase Edmonds, Sean Tucker, like what is happening there? Who is going to emerge from that spot? So in the grand scheme of things, that rushing attack is really going to dictate the success of this offense. And if they can't be, if they can't emerge from the cellar of what they're doing there, it really limits the amount of things they can do as a whole. They need to establish some north and south to their rushing attack. I like what they can do east and west, but you don't want to live east and west, considering, it takes longer for you to gain yards moving east and west than it does taking north and south. So watching the rushing game, who emerges in that group. And two, I'm very curious with the secondary, mostly because they have a lot of really good pieces, Izzian, Tyke Smith, Zion McCollum, Jamel Dean, Jordan Whitehead, Antoine Winfield Jr. Like those are 6 players that they should find the field some way or another. How do they do that? And hopefully it's not for injury, but and that's not even mentioning guys like Tavier Thomas and Hall, who they just got from the Jets, who are kind of those like options in case Jamel Dean gets hurt, which judging by his injury history is going to happen at some point, and Zion McCollum. So, they're like 8 deep there. How do they utilize the depth and strength of those positions, certainly of the best maybe safety duo in the league in Winfield and Whitehead, to kind of mask some of the deficiencies that they have at outside linebacker, certainly the lack of depth at the linebacker position. Like, is Levante David still going to be superhuman? Like, what happens if he takes a small step backwards? Not that I expect it because this guy is a freak of nature. But, KJ Britt also, he's a guy that, while he's going to earn the starting gig there as the other linebacker, he might not be like an every every down type of guy like we've been so accustomed to watching here in Tampa Bay. He might be somebody who's more matchup based. Hey, if this is a run heavy team, KJ, you're going to play a lot. If it's more of a passing operation and we're not too afraid of their rushing prowess, you might see a lot less of KJ in that game, and it can fluctuate and be a game plan to game plan type of scheme, which I think would fit Todd Bowles in the best way possible. So, yeah, I want to see the rushing attack get better, show some signs of life and promise, see someone emerge there behind Rashad. And then I also want to see just how the secondary pieces are moving, if there's something that catches my eye. So I want to see if we get a glimpse into the Todd Bowles creativity.
Hear me out on this. Antoine Winfield Jr., edge rusher.
I mean, I'm not taking. I mean, we're going to see Vita Vea lined up, out there. We're going to see Kalijah Kancey lined up out there. Todd's going to do some crazy stuff, and I don't want to say crazy stuff. He's just going to do his normal stuff when it comes to blitzing for him. But yeah, I'm sure there are going to be plays there where Antoine's maybe set up. Like he'll probably build a set for him, considering that Antoine is one of the most comfortable players with Todd Bowles' system, between him, Vea, Dean, Whitehead to a degree, Levante, of course. I mean, those guys are really the most comfortable with the Todd Bowles schemes and the guys you can throw the most at. Mm-hmm. So use that to your advantage, certainly because you're getting paid to take on that weight as well.
Yeah, and something else that, in talking about all of these members of the secondary, and I guess in a way, we've kind of alluded to it in one way or another throughout the course of the offseason, but as you were listing off all of these guys, it got me thinking. The Bucs are treating their secondary, it seems like at this point, the same way they're treating their offensive line. You have all of these pieces now that can play outside corner, slot corner, and safety in any given moment. Isian was a safety, play slot corner. Tyke Smith, safety and slot corner. Zion played safety in a playoff game. So you have all of these pieces that you can move around, and really Todd Bowles could do some really, really interesting things with all these pieces. You could see, 6 corners or 6 players from the secondary on the field at any given moment.
See, that's what I'm really curious about, because I think there are going to be packages where you're going to see 6 of those guys out there. Mm-hmm. And maybe they're thinking that's like the future, right? Like maybe to an extent with the amount of how much speed has been incorporated to the offensive side of the football, maybe you lean on the fact that we got enough beef and structure in the rushing defense that we can counterbalance it with taking a little size off the field and just running with these dudes. And if we can run with them, then maybe we got something that nobody else has. So I believe we'll see 6 secondary pieces out there from the Buccaneers at times. It won't be at all times, certainly.
Right. It's not the base package.
No. But it will be change-ups. I think it will be used as a change-up. And again, matchup based. So
yeah, for sure.
That's what I think. That's when I think Todd Bowles thrives the most, when he can be a little bit of a chameleon.
All right. Well, that is going to do it for this episode of Locked On Bucs. Evan, let everybody know what's going on over on 10 Tampa Bay and at 10tampabay.com.
Well, we're going to be at camp day 1, baby. So you're going to want to head to at eClaskey WTSP on Twitter, because I'll have updates there. We'll be all over 10 Tampa Bay, noon, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, previewing kind of day 1 action. 10tampabay.com, 10 Tampa Bay Plus. And yeah, I mean, we're fully back into football season right now, and we will continue to march forward until that home opener on September 7th, I believe, against the Washington Commanders, that 4:00 something kick. So it's here. We're going to hit a lull in a couple of weeks where we're like, oh man, we're like close, but we're not close enough. But it's nice to have football back in our lives.
We talking about practice.
All right. Make sure you are checking out what Evan is doing over there covering your Buccaneers training camp. Please check out everything going on over at bucksnation.com. Make sure you are following on Twitter at Locked On Bucs, at Yarcho_Bucs, at eCloskey WTSP. Subscribe on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts, and you can become a Locked On Bucs insider by going to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs or click the link in the show notes. Hope you all have an absolutely outstanding day. Stay safe, stay healthy, fire the cannons. Want to thank you so much for joining us right here on Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.